Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. I've got William He back on the show today. He is the founder and leader of Dream for America, which, and I'm going to read off the website so I don't mess this up, is focused on identifying, educating, and mobilizing America's students to defend democracy, fight fascism, and advance liberal values. There's a subtext here. Can you talk about Turning Point USA and how effective it has been on the right at mobilizing young people, and how until Dream for America came along, we really didn't have an answer?
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me on the show, Ken, and appreciate it. I actually first ran into it in person in Chicago at the DNC. So I'm glad to be back. So as for Turning Point, well, for anyone who doesn't know what Turning Point USA is, I mean, they're essentially a far-right organization founded by Charlie Kirk. And what they do essentially is indoctrinate young people to become Christian MAGA nationalists. And they've been incredibly effective at what they do. I mean, just some numbers off the top of my head here. Turning Point has hundreds of millions of dollars in their war chest. They have 4,000 campus chapters across the country in high schools, colleges, and beyond that. They have hundreds of full-time staff. They have, I think, over 200,000 student volunteers. They have a whole team of content contributors who produce podcasts and documentaries and shows, and they work with other groups too to create content. They are an incredible cultural force, and that's the underscore, cultural force, to try to convince young people to become far-right conservatives. They've also had a history of, tapping into the dark corners of the political spectrum. They funded buses to take students to January 6th. They amplify white nationalists like Nick Fuentes. They had him speak at different campuses. They dox professors that they deem are Marxist or communist or leftist, and school board professors are members too. And essentially, they are trying to reintroduce homophobia and sexism and Christian nationalism and anti-science, denying all of that back into the mainstream. And you know what? It's working, right? Young people right now, as much as I love my generation, we're kind of in a bind right now. Young people's trust in media and government and in liberal institutions is at an all-time low. I mean, most young people get their news now from social media, which the information is unreliable. It's often misinformation, disinformation. Trust in institutions is at an all-time low. People don't even believe in science anymore. There's debate about whether science is true or not. And people have just lost faith in democracy and the Constitution and just in the validity of actual historical events and just science, right? People question vaccines. 23% of young people don't even believe the Holocaust was real. And so, I don't want to blame people for what they believe in, right? We have to meet people where they are and try to change their minds. But it is indicative of how much the right has spent over the last 10 years in trying to shift the cultural Overton window and getting young people and Americans in general and move them in a far more radical direction. And Dream for America is here to try to bring back some common sense, to try to listen to people, talk to people, and fundamentally change youth political culture online and on campus so that we can have a generation who is ready to take the baton 10, 20 years from now and become the educated, well-spoken future leaders that we know we can be. And so that's our objective. And we've only been around for about a year or so, but we have seen a tremendous amount of progress. We've raised about $500,000 to date. We have hundreds of volunteers who have signed up to start chapters. We, of course, went to the DNC and, went to the Dempaloosa convention and presented our booth as well. We have done just a lot in just the span of 12 months, and I am very excited for what's to come in the next 4 years. Although the results of this election were not optimal, it represents a great opportunity for us to try to shape the coalitions and the messaging and the culture of what the Democratic Party can be going forward.
Well, you're right. The results were not optimal, but I will tell you there are some inherent advantages to being on defense, to being part of a resistance. It allows you to be subversive in ways you can't really be subversive when you're in power. But I want to go back to your underscoring of Turning Point as a cultural force. And it gets at this idea, which we debate about all the time. Does politics follow culture, or does culture follow politics? It seems like your theory of the case is we need to start with a cultural approach. And I think that speaks to meeting people where they are. That's a culturally valenced tactic as opposed to a politically valenced one.
Right. And, this past election has made clear that, I don't think Americans have actually shifted right. I think it is an election of frustrations based on their perceptions of what the country is and what culture is, that can be a whole other discussion on how people get their information. But the fact of the matter is, we lost a significant amount of ground on almost every demographic. I mean, Vice President Harris only won young voters by, I think, 4 or 6 points based on a study that I saw. And that's down from 30 points. And you saw young men swing 30 points to the right, young women, post-Roe, swing 15 points to the right. And the list goes on and on among other demographics, Hispanics, Asian Americans, even Native Americans, 65, 67, 68% voted for Trump. And more young people identify as Republican than any time in recent history. And I'm not saying that, organizations like Turning Point are wholly responsible for the national, change that's happened in the last 10 years, but they have played such a big role. And the way they do it is kind of the idea of, and they're right, if you win the culture, you do win the country. In this election, right, there's a lot of brilliant, amazing people and organizations who are out there fighting the good fight, trying to get young people to turn out, trying to get young people to the polls and registering them to vote. And that's a worthy playbook, and it's the right playbook, and it has been for the last couple decades. However, the different thing this time around is that we're playing on a different battlefield. And while that was the right playbook for elections past, now we need to adapt, right? In years past, the theory goes that young people vote overwhelmingly Democratic, and all we need to do is register them to vote and make sure they turn out. And because the votes are already baked in with that assumption. But now, as this election has shown us, that young people are a lot more competitive and that a lot of minds have shifted in the last couple of cycles. And so my theory of the game here is that if we make long-term investments with the right organizations and the right people and the right kinds of content and organization on the ground, we can make a cultural difference where we fundamentally change people's values, mindsets, and much more. And so when election time does come and these organizations do go out and call people and text people and get them out to vote, the votes will actually be there for them to harness, right? Because young people, are not making decisions based on the ads that they see in the text they get, but it's a sum total of their life experiences and interactions in their podcasts, media, culture, their friend groups, what's happening on campus, what people are talking about on the ground in real life. And that's, as I mentioned before, the big underscore word, culture and conversations. That's what we're going to be doing with young people all across this country to make sure that we have conversations with people, meet them where they are, and try to get them to join the right side.
How many of those political decisions that they're making are based on misinformation? I mean, you threw out one stat, 23% of young people don't believe the Holocaust happened. There was a recent Ipsos poll that showed across the issues of economics, crime, immigration, and I can't remember the fourth one, but the more likely you were to believe in disinformation about each of those categories, the more likely you were by a massive margin to vote for Trump. Is the rightward drift of young people due to them being mired in a disinformation ecosystem, or is it a statement?
It's a combination.
Or it could be both.
It's a combination of both. I think, right, like the whole narrative about young people and Gen Z saving democracy and saving the world, as much as I love that narrative, I think was never the case. And especially so this election, that young people were going to save the world. In fact, this election, maybe it's kind of the opposite. But the great thing, though, is that young people are not hyperpartisan creatures. In fact, we're rather apolitical. And so while a lot of minds did shift this time around, there's still a great chance and a long road ahead for us to offer them an alternative. And that's what we're offering, right? Turning Point is all about this deep, dark vision of America in which everything is rigged against you and that the deep state is out to get you and that groups of people are out here to take advantage of you and your position in this country and your jobs, and that the solution to all of that is to silo out everyone who is a threat, to take a sledgehammer to all the things that are perceived to be against you, right? And it's just so much vitriol and anger and tapping into the exact same kind of politics that keeps on repeating in history, that people have real economic anxieties. And then as an ideology, right, groups like Turning Point and politicians like Donald Trump then take advantage of that and speak to that and then turn people towards, well, racism, towards xenophobia, towards, a sledgehammer to our institutions and the rule of law and the way of life. Our alternative is going to be offering something better, right? Which is that, yes, there are real problems in this country. And yes, we understand your anger, but liberals have always been the ones there to actually want to solve the problem. And, here's X, Y, and Z how we're going to do that. Right? I mean, after all, liberals were the ones to win 2 world wars, land a man on the moon, give you Social Security, put forward civil rights, and so much more, right? I mean, what we're going to try to do on campus essentially is make liberalism cool again. Because right now, it's cool to be conservative. It used to be that, it was cool to be a liberal, but not so much anymore. So let's make liberalism cool again. And that also means conversation, but it also means, trying to reach people in new and engaging ways. So that's conversation, but also content online, and different ways to, reach people, but also on campus, right? Having chapters, having conversations, maybe, organizing parties, getting people to gather around for food, organizing different ways for people to engage, maybe, volleyball games, right, in which people can come together and then talk about it. So, as I said, right, fundamentally, it's a cultural case that we have to be making. And once we do make that case, and once we do change people's minds, and we have made a dent in people's minds, then come election time, the votes will be there.
Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then, Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, etc. So if you want to stay on track with your health this holiday season, go to lumen.me/Ken to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Ken for 15% off your purchase. Lumen makes a great gift too. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break here to let you know that we'd love to hear from you. Your comments, suggestions, thoughts about future topics and guests. Email us at info@thekenharbaughshow.com and make sure to rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and back to the show. One of the things that initially surprised me about Dream for America, it doesn't anymore because I understand the theory of the case, but at first I was equal parts surprised and impressed by your overt patriotism. Not necessarily typical for a youth-led organization, but you're unabashed in your love for America and your desire to see America live up to its promise. Respond to that first, and then I have a question about how you leverage that to counter the false patriotism, the Christian nationalism of the youth groups on the right.
Right. So, the kind of patriotism that we subscribe to is not, an undying, rubber stamp on everything the United States does, right? But real patriotism is all about recognizing that our country has issues and that we love our country so much, we want to do everything we can to fix it. And that starts with saying that, yes, we're proud to be Americans. We love this country. And we love it so much that we want to solve all of these issues, right? We want to make sure that people have access to healthcare. We want to make sure that people have their individual freedoms, tie that to the Constitution, right? We want to make sure that people have everything they want or everything that they need to not just survive, but thrive in this country. And, Charlie Kirk was actually talking about, and Vivek Ramaswamy were talking about the RNC, about how young people can save America by getting married, saluting the flag, and teaching their kids to read a Bible. That's not how you save America. You save America by making sure that every single person in this country can live their authentic lives and have the best chance possible to reach their version of the American dream. That's the kind of patriotism that we want. And that's kind of the contrast that we're pushing with the right-wing groups, right? Their version of patriotism is conforming everyone to their version of their optimal lifestyle, meanwhile siphoning out everyone they don't like and clearing the way for their version of some version of distorted patriotism. Our version of patriotism is all about this country's great. It's not great anymore, but with the right steps, we can make sure that it's great once again. But fundamentally, I think to answer a question, I think young people do want to believe that this country is great. We just have to give them the reason to, and we just got to tap into that and communicate with them in a different way. And fundamentally, that's kind of the lesson for this election as a whole. I think the Democratic Party has the right ideas and the right policies, but it just didn't cut through to enough people, right? A lot of people had distorted views of what the party represented and what we believed in and what the vice president believed in. And they are valid for those beliefs, right? But we just need to find new ways to meet them where they are and have that conversation.
The other sidecar of this overt phony patriotism on the right is a perversion of Christianity. That's why it's called Christian nationalism, right? I've been reading a lot and watching a lot of you online. And as someone who grew up in a deeply religious conservative family, I pick up on the code words, and I've heard you quote John Wesley. Do you bring a Christian, like an authentic Christian outlook to this work?
Aspects of it, yes, right? Our plan is to, bring in, young Christian voices who can speak to young people who are Christian and make them understand that real Christianity is not about hating others, right? Jesus taught us to love the poor, feed the sick, welcome those who are the tired and the hungry and the masses, right? And welcome them with open arms and to help them and to love your neighbor and to forgive. That's what Jesus was all about. Jesus is not about upholding your beliefs over all others. It's not about putting your version of what your lifestyle should be and putting that onto everyone else. It's not about taking Jesus' word and trying to use that to justify your own gain, right? That's not what Christianity is all about.
I mean, there's also Jesus the man, not just the philosopher, right? But Jesus the itinerant resistor, arguably an illegal in his own community. I think if Christian nationalists truly understood the example of Jesus, they could not live with themselves.
Right. 100%. And so to answer your question, right, like we want to try to bring that into the tent, right? Because what we're doing is not just about appealing to everyone who's already, religiously reading Politico playbook, right? And who's a young person who's super into politics and is already liberal, but about trying to reach people and connect with people who might not be interested in politics or who might be interested in politics, but, we want to convince them that our beliefs are the correct set of beliefs to hold. And so bring that part of the conversation in is vitally important.
William, where can people learn more about Dream for America and how can they help?
Of course. So where you can learn more, you can head to dreamforamerica.org. That will just be dreamforamerica.org. You can visit us on pretty much every single social media channel imaginable: Instagram, Twitter, I refuse to call it X, Threads. We're on Blue Sky now, TikTok, YouTube, the list goes on, Facebook. You can follow us on all those channels to stay updated on our content and what we're up to. if you're able to, I encourage you to please chip in and make a donation and support our efforts. Your financial support will go towards supporting our efforts on the ground, supporting our team of creators who can communicate with young people, and to make sure that our work continues year-round. And then beyond that, if you're a young person who is listening to this, go to our website, sign up, get involved, start a chapter, or audition to become a creator for us. We're trying to not only counter Turning Point, but this entire right-wing ecosystem, trying to reach young people. So we're looking for young people who are articulate, know the issues, and are excited to tell the world about what they believe in, and can do it well. So if that sounds like you, please get involved. And if not, please start a chapter. We are more than happy to get you involved, to have you talk to your peers about why this country is great and why liberalism is the way to go to make this country even better. So check out our website, follow us on socials, donate if you can, and if not, get involved.
Awesome. Thank you, William. Great having you. Let's do it again soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Ken.